Tonight on Primetime Politics, Liberal advantage.
10 days later, we see this lead is growing and growing, and now we have an average of 6 points in favor of the Liberals.
2 weeks into this campaign, and the Mark Carney Liberals continue to hold momentum, aided by concerns around the U.S. president. But is that party peaking too early, and how will Donald Trump's global tariffs put Mark Carney to the test? We will discuss. This is Primetime Politics. Hello, I'm Michael Serapio. Well, we're now wrapping up the second week of Canada's 45th general election campaign, and despite having no political experience, Mark Carney continues to lead in the polls, as does his Liberal Party. This over rivals Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet, and NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, all of whom are promising to fight Donald Trump and the tariffs he's applied on Canadian and global goods. So with that, let us check in with this second week in the campaign with the Ottawa Bureau Chiefs. Bob Fife, the Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Globe and Mail, Tonda MacCharles, the Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star, Joël-Denis Bellavance, the Ottawa Bureau Chief for LaPresse. Hello to the three of you.
Hello, Michael.
Glad to be here.
So here we are, as I said, week two, just about to wrap up. We're about a third of the way into this campaign, and Donald Trump appears twice in as many weeks as this has run. So talk to us overall about how Donald Trump's involvement, and so visibly so, has affected the campaign.
Well, just look at the polls. I mean, the Liberals have a 10-point lead over the Conservatives now, and Mr. Mark Carney's preference over Pierre Poilievre is 20% lead. That is astounding change from before Justin Trudeau resigned, when the Conservatives had a 20% lead over the Liberals, and then after Mr. Trudeau left, a lot of the poison came out of the system, and then along comes Donald Trump with his tariffs threats, and it just changed everything for the Liberals. And look, we know that this next week is going to be an important week for Mr. Poilievre. He needs to be able to figure a way to come back. And then we go into the debates. But after the debates, if he cannot hit a home run in the debates, we've got 1 week left. Yeah. That's it. Yeah, and it's been largely driven by Canadians' fear of Donald Trump and the tariffs and, God knows, likely recession if the America goes into a recession. And the feeling that Mr. Carney, because he's a two-time Bank of Canada governor, both here in Canada and England, is more qualified for the job. And that's a struggle for Mr. Poilievre.
Well, let's pick up on that. You know, Bob talks about how Donald Trump has lifted the Liberal boat, but, you know, when you talk about the Conservatives, the NDP, the Bloc, they are now all struggling up against the fact that Donald Trump will not go away in terms of this campaign.
And in fact, I noticed a distinct change in tone by Mr. Poilievre this week. The Trump tariff threats have forced his campaign to modify a bunch of things. First of all, there's a tonal shift. Second of all, there's been some specific campaign pledges rolled out to address the Trump threats. Everything from, you know, capital gains tax deferrals, business loan program. And you heard him on the day that Carney unveiled Canada's counter tariffs. Mr. Poilievre finally conceded the point that Carney's been making, that the days of a deepening trade commercial relationship with the U.S. are over. And Mr. Poilievre finally on Thursday, for the first time, said, up until yesterday, I, like many Canadians, thought it was still possible, but that's no longer the case. So he has switched both in tone and policy, and even the art on his podium has changed. He's no longer having slogans on his podium. He's got a big maple leaf on his podium, and he's trying to put forward a more prime ministerial look. So Trump has changed not just the Liberal sort of buoyancy, but it's changed, I think, what was a 2-year campaign plan that the Conservatives had been working up, changed it now as they go, as they're going through this thing. They're moving and shifting on a dime.
The federal election is actually an audition for who will become prime minister with Canadians. Canadians are basically conducting the interviews with different candidates, and so far, I made the calculation. The first 12 days, Mr. Carney spent 4 days being prime minister because he had to respond to Mr. Trump. So people see that He's actually a prime minister who can make decisions, announce big things in retaliation against the U.S. administration. So it leaves the contest unfair for the rest of the leaders.
I mean, arguably, Mr. Poilievre was auditioning for the job of opposition leader for those first 11 days until he started to switch gears, which he finally did.
Exactly. But
they won't call it that, though. He's still insisting he is not switching focus. He's not switching focus, but the frame is different.
Absolutely. He has no choice to change the message because the ballot questions remains the big one, Donald Trump, and what do you do with him if you have power? But that leaves little space for marginal parties, if I can call them that way. The Bloc Québécois, who the leader cannot be prime minister, and Mr. Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP, who cannot be prime minister as well. So it squeezes them out, and they're trying to squeeze a lemon that is empty of juice right now. There's nothing left for them.
You raise a very good point, because the Conservative vote is actually pretty strong. It's at around 37, 38%. So, and the Liberals are up because why? The NDP vote has gone to the Liberals, and the Bloc Québécois vote has gone.
And the Green also. The Green. What was it?
And I would think it's probably some blue Liberals that had business Liberals who had left the Liberal Party because of Mr. Trudeau have also come back. But the Conservative vote is strong, but how can he grow? He's not likely to grow from the NDP or the Bloc Québécois.
Well, and this is what I was going to say, because when you talk about Conservatives at 37, that's actually close to base, right? Like, I mean, in any election, you're
33
counting.
33 is more their base. 33,
exactly.
32, 34 is their base.
Yeah.
They had grown up to 37, I would argue, over the last 2 years. But the problem is their vote efficiency vis-a-vis the Liberal efficiency of a vote, given, their numbers are in the 40s range, they have to be much further ahead to not just form government, to claim the most seats, even to form a minority government.
Yeah, and Bob raises a good point. How do you grow the Conservative base at 37 while you've been slamming, for Mr. Poilievre, you've been slamming the NDP leader for the last year or so, calling Mr. Singh a sellout. So you sort of talk down Mr. Singh and his base. So they're not going to go for you. He did the same thing with the Bloc Québécois. So he didn't build alliances while he was an opposition leader. Now he needs alliances to be able to pursue his final quest and be prime minister. And that's the problem for him now.
Okay, but I do want to ask this question, though, because here you have the Liberals very much in the lead. Mark Carney getting these positive, I guess, reviews from Canadians. But is there a danger that the Liberals and Mark Carney are peaking too early? It's still got, 2/3 of this campaign left, and arguably he has been helped out by Donald Trump because it's given him the opportunity to lead where he's more comfortable in rather than campaigning.
Well, look, I think that's a legitimate point you're raising. Next week is pivotal for the Liberals to be able to maintain that lead. I think it's interesting if you look at his campaign schedule for next week. This is a campaign that's going at targeting NDP and Conservative ridings, including they're going to be in Saskatchewan where they have no seats. So that shows you that they see the tide going in their favor. But you can make a couple of mistakes and it could change. But I think the decisive moment comes for the debates. That's where millions of Canadians will be able to look and say, can this guy... is he good enough? And, he probably is not going to be a good debater compared to Mr. Poilievre and Mr. Blanchette. But maybe because he's not a politician, people are going to give him a little bit of slack on that. But if they can't really do harm to him after the debates, it's over.
Yeah, it's over. And as you say, the debate's just about a week and a half, 2 weeks away. Tonda, what do you say? Is there danger of peaking?
The debates are pivotal, but, I don't think any of us here have a crystal ball. No one's going to say, yeah, it's done, it's over, the Liberals have won it. Too soon to say that. But there's no question that the tariff drama is playing out in real time, and people south of the border are seeing investment savings evaporate. People are losing in the thousands their jobs in Canada right now. So I don't underestimate the ongoing impact of that on everybody.
And I expect Mr. Trump's shadow to remain large until the end of the campaign, because now the markets are falling. Mr. Trump will have to react to that. Will he come back and reverse his position? That will have an impact on the election campaign. And for the debates, I'd like to come back to the French debate. I don't think this French debate will be as crucial as in the past, for a simple reason. Quebecers have a choice between, for them, Mr. Poilievre is not very popular with Quebecers. So Quebecers will be looking either Mr. Blanchet or Mr. Carney. Mr. Carney's French is, laborious at times, but they'll be looking at a prime minister, at the prime minister. And Mr. Blanchet cannot be prime minister. So in that French debate, that is a serious handicap for Mr. Blanchet.
Okay, so we're keeping that debate. Before we're done, I also want to talk about Preston Manning because, he a bit eclipsed by Donald Trump because the day that Donald Trump had his tariff announcement, that's when Mr. Manning wrote an op-ed for your paper, Bob, where he talked about a vote for Carney as a vote for Western separation. What impact does that statement have? Does that statement need to be heeded by Canadians?
Well, first of all, my view of Preston Manning's always been is he's a demagogue. I remember when he first got on the political scene, he was running against French, running against Quebec. And he's always tried to inflame and push people's buttons. And this is what he's doing here again. And I think what he's done is done more harm to Pierre Poilievre than he's done for the Liberals. Having said that, there is that we have to take seriously the sense of Western alienation. Mr. Carney cannot ignore the fact that they feel that they are being targeted all the time, and we worry about the auto sector, but we don't worry about the oil and gas sector. So I don't think we should discount that. I would hope that Mr. Carney is enough of a statesman to understand that you have to recognize that and figure out ways to make sure that Western Canada, which we rely on for their oil and natural gas, which pays for our social programs, are not ignored.
Tonda?
Yeah, no, there's no question that Mr. Manning, I would say, has been an ideologue all his life. And, I do remember how the Reform Party was an agent fighting against any accommodation of Quebec's interests, constitutional or otherwise, a number in the past. And so it's kind of, he portrays himself in that piece as the agent of the West wants in and the conciliatory agent, but that is not the role he has played in the past. And I think that, yes, we do have to take note of and trust that political leaders will acknowledge the Western alienation issues right now. But I don't find that what he advanced is the solution to that. To tell Eastern Canada, you can't vote Liberal or else the country's going to break up is just a nonsensical proposition.
The last time I checked, we do live in democracy, and people will make their choice. And if Mr. Manning doesn't like it and would reject the result of a fair election, well, I think he doesn't understand how democracy works, in my sense. And for the first time, I think, in 10 years, you have a Liberal leader who's open to trying to get our resources to Tidewater by opening up a national energy corridor. This was put forward before by the Conservative Party under Andrew Scheer. It is now being adopted by Mr. Carney, and he's trying to convince the premiers, which you need to do if you want it to be successful, the premiers to accept also a national energy corridor. So I would say
First Nations. He's also trying to involve Indigenous communities.
And that's a key point too.
So he's accommodating all the interests. That's the difference between the route Mr. Manning's proposing.
Okay. Well, listen, never enough time, but I appreciate it. Bob, Tonda, Joël-Denis, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, let's switch now from the campaign to trade because, as we heard from Mark Carney yesterday in his role as Prime Minister, Canada has now announced counter tariffs on American-made vehicles. This was yesterday, a direct response to the Trump tariff being applied to vehicles being made here in Canada. Well, let's bring Steve MacKinnon into the conversation right now, the Minister for Jobs and Families. He's here to talk about the federal government's response to the Trump tariffs. Minister, thank you for taking the time.
Good evening, Michael.
Listen, right after Trump unveiled his global tariffs this week, workers at Windsor's Stellantis plant were told that they'd be losing at least 2 weeks' worth of work. And that happened in less than 24 hours. So I'm wondering about the calculations your government has been making. When you look at the auto sector right now, just how many jobs could potentially be affected by the tariffs introduced really last week by Mr. Trump, but in effect now?
Well, I would refer you to the experts in the industry who comment on these things regularly, who speak of supply chain delays and cars that cross the border 5 or 6 times down to Mexico, back up to Canada with suppliers from all over an automotive ecosystem. of course, these tariffs will reverberate throughout that supply chain, throughout North America, with negative impacts on jobs. These are things we've been warning the U.S. administration about for many, many months now, as have others, and of course, the companies themselves. You saw the CEO of Ford talk about the negative impact on the North American car industry that these tariffs would have, and we regret, of course, a single job loss, a single layoff for a single week. We are in total solidarity with the people in that local in Unifor in Windsor, and we will stand by workers in every car plant, in every assembly plant, in every car auto part manufacturing facility, in every part of that supply chain in Canada. We'll fight for every single job.
Mm-hmm. You know, I think a lot of Canadians are wondering, you know, just how bad this is going to get, because, you know, the auto sector is one sector. It is a key sector in terms of the national economy, but only really one sector. These tariffs are everywhere and pretty broad-based. Just how bad is it going to get? When you get that question from Canadians, what do you say to them?
Well, I say the first thing is that at some point, we hope, you see the stock market in the last couple of days, that common sense will prevail. That is a supreme vote of lack of confidence in this, what we view as a misguided tariff plan by the U.S. administration. So we have a plan to fight that, and we have a plan in the presence of that. If the U.S. administration decides to fully implement this, well, Canada will go its own way, make its own decisions, and pursue its own destiny. And that destiny includes an automobile industry. That that plan includes a supply chain network that will be upgraded, building homes, building railways, building energy infrastructure, building port facilities. This country needs to get building, to diversify our trade markets, to renew our infrastructure, and obviously to keep people at work. So what I would say is that tariffs are bad. They will hurt. They will hurt Americans too. They will hurt Americans in a big way, and you're seeing that again expressed in equity markets. But you will especially see the government of Canada work with provinces, have one economy, not 13 economies, and make sure that our country pursues an alternative economic path.
Alternative economic path, and you know, you noted the markets, and of course, what we saw yesterday was the worst one-day loss since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. And when you rewind to that time, that was when financial supplements were handed out to individuals and businesses. Is that what your government is prepared to do should it get to the point where these tariffs are fully implemented and not going away?
Well, this is an important point you raise, Michael, and Mr. Carney has been very clear that the proceeds of any countermeasures that we put in place to fight these tariffs and inflict damage on the United States, well, those proceeds will be directed towards those workers who are affected. And that is a very, very clear difference with our opponents in this election. You know, Mr. Poilievre has said he's going to take that money and apply across-the-board tax cuts, including to the wealthiest in society. So what you would have is a Windsor auto worker fundamentally with his job or with her job underwriting a tax cut for a wealthy person from somewhere else in Canada. We don't believe that's right. What we believe is right is to apply the proceeds of that to defend automobile production in Canada, to help the workers who are most directly impacted. That's the vision that we're putting forward. We'd prefer not to be having this conversation or this debate. We want to see what can be done to minimize or eliminate these misguided and illegal tariffs. But if we can't do that, then we've been very, very clear that we'll be there for workers, we'll be there for industries, we'll be there for businesses who suffer harm.
When you talk about those proceeds, Minister, will they be enough to supplement incomes? Will they be enough to cover the programs you want to create?
Well, of course, I call it the bouncing ball, Michael. You know, you have steel and aluminum tariffs, and you have fentanyl tariffs that have been postponed. And then you have the auto tariffs that were just announced a few days ago, he still says that he's going to tariff semiconductors or copper or forest products. So it's, as you can imagine, and this is true for the rest of the world as well, it's pretty hard to follow that bouncing ball because it never seems to stop bouncing. So I can better answer your question, your very good question. When that ball stops bouncing, one thing you can be sure of is that if more tariffs are applied to Canada, to any sector of our economy, forest workers in British Columbia or Quebec, semiconductor workers to the mining industry, you can be sure that we will respond in kind, and we will respond in ways that inflict major damage on the U.S. economy as well.
Minister MacKinnon, always appreciate the time. Thank you for this.
Thank you, Michael.
Well, let's continue our look at the impact of auto tariffs. Dan Carter is the mayor of Oshawa, Ontario, nicknamed Canada's Motor City. Mayor Carter, thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, Michael. It's good to see you, and I wish you all the best of the day.
Thank you very much. Listen, GM, obviously the big automotive employer in Oshawa, arguably the most exposed of the North American car companies to integrated supply chains. But you're on record as saying you remain optimistic despite these tariffs. Why?
Absolutely. I think it comes down to as you know, we went through a very interesting time in 2018, just days prior to me taking the oath of office, when General Motors had to make a decision under Trump 45 about closing down and seeing our production end after over 100 years. And we got through that because of the reason that we worked with General Motors and Unifor throughout one of the most difficult periods of time. And that's what gives me a great deal of optimism. I also look at our plant and I see the diversity that it has, the capacity of doing something very unique in North America. And that gives us kind of a competitive edge, not only in regards to the quality of the product, but also on the productivity level. And we also having a unique line that is able to have two different types of models going down the same line, and to be able to produce these automobiles. So that gives us, in my opinion, a competitive edge. And what I'm hearing from General Motors is it is also one of the most sought after products in North America. And we're seeing about 150,000 units that are produced here and shipped. And I just feel very optimistic about what I've heard so far.
Now is that based on this idea that to move this production elsewhere would just be too expensive for GM?
Well, I think there's a couple things. If I can give you kind of an insight, I'm spending a lot of time visiting companies right now. And one is the uncertainty of what we should expect. There's an announcement after announcement, but nobody really has clarity in regards to what the rules and regulations are. That's number one. The fear of the instability of not knowing what next week, next month, or 8 months from now really is businesses are sitting there and are, hard to make a decision based upon not factual information. And then the complexities of the auto industry itself, if we're speaking about that, is the complexities of moving that kind of facility. In Oshawa, as you know, our facility here is 10 million square feet, 3,500 people on the production line. So moving that and this system that is so integrated and has an ecosystem of itself is very complex. And I thought Mayor Drew in Windsor brought up a really good point. He said, this has taken years and years and years to be able to get a system that works efficiently in regards to the automobile industry. To kind of switch it overnight is unrealistic, and it's improbable that it can actually happen quickly. So that's where a lot of my confidence comes from. But businesses need certainty. And right now, we really don't know what's going to happen next week, next month, or 8 months from now. And that means I might as well stay where I am. I might as well have the predictability of doing business in Canada right now till we can figure out what's going to happen in the United States.
Yeah, until we can figure out, as you say. Now, the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, says that a meeting will happen with Donald Trump sometime after the election, and that meeting would ostensibly hold regardless of who becomes Prime Minister. So what's your take away from that? The very fact that the two sides seem willing to speak, but really what's holding it up right now is the fact that we're in the midst of an election campaign.
Yeah, talk about timing. We don't have really good timing right at this particular time. And that's been part of the frustration, is really who do we deal with? Even on the municipal side, when we're talking about healthcare, I can deal with the province, but I don't know who to deal with at the federal side. You know, I've said this before that I'm pleased about the participation, especially from Premier Ford and what he's been able to do. He's being very statesmanlike. He's being clear and concise and consistent. He's working with the Prime Minister and the other premiers. I think the trade table that they're all sitting at is having frank, spirited conversations to really talk about where Canada is and where our economy is. And I think we're having some very hard conversations about what is needed right now, but what the future may hold. And I think there's going to be a period of adjustment and transition in not only Ontario, but all across Canada. I also look at this, Michael, as a great opportunity. You know, in Oshawa at one time, our economy was 86% manufacturing. It's 3 to 4% right now. We've diversified our economy, and that's been beneficial. I think Canada has now got the challenge in front of it that we must diversify. These interprovincial trade barriers coming down is a good start, and I think that has to happen. But new trading partners, new ways of doing businesses, I think that's all the things that we're going to be challenged with. This could be a moment of opportunity for Canadians and the Canadian economy, and I don't want us to waste this moment through anger and fear. I want us coming together as a nation to be able to work together to solve these issues. And I feel confident that the premiers are sitting around a table. Mark Carney, of course, is trying to do his best, not only as a candidate, but also holding the role of Prime Minister at this particular time. So let's hope that we are strategic, calm, and that we find a pathway forward, and I'm confident of that.
Dan Carter, appreciate the time. Thank you for the thoughts and the insight today.
Always nice to speak to you, Michael. Stay well.
You too. Well, before we go, as we noted off top, the Liberals are doing well in the polls nationally, but provincially, that party is also building leads in the country's seat-rich provinces. Philippe Fournier is the founder and the writer of 338 Canada. Take a listen to what he had to say about the races in Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia.
If we look at Ontario, we saw, yes, the NDP taking a hit now in single digits in the province, but there was also a transfer from the Conservatives towards the Liberals in the first week of the campaign. And now we have the Liberals hanging around 45 to 50% in the province, which would be enough to win a majority of seats and would block the Conservatives from hoping to even get a plurality. Whereas, Michael, if we look at Quebec, the numbers of Quebec have gone a little berserk, I must say, because we had seen the Liberals take the lead over the Bloc Québécois, but it's not as much as a lead now as a wide chasm. There are polls, such as Léger this week, that give the Liberals a 20-point lead over the Bloc Québécois, which means that the Liberals are even winning the Francophone vote in the province, something that hasn't happened in a long time. And finally, in British Columbia, the Conservatives are getting their 40-ish%. This is what they usually have in a federal and provincial election in British Columbia. But the collapse of the NDP is boosting the Liberals' numbers. And so the Liberals, which had about 27% of the vote in the 2021 election in BC, now they're hovering around the high 30s or low 40s. So many gains in seats in these three provinces for the Liberals.
So a bit of a snapshot of where things stand right now. Our thanks to Philippe Fournier. You can catch the full interview on our website, cpac.ca, and on our YouTube channel. As for Primetime Politics, that is our show for you this evening. I'm Michael Serapio. We're back on Monday. Until then, take care and have a great weekend.